Good evening.
Good evening.
And welcome or welcome back to Shepherd of the Hills Lutheran Church, as we had opportunity last evening to remember Jesus with his disciples in the upper room, in which he washed their feet, and then we know they celebrated the Passover meal, in which Jesus instituted the new covenant, which we also shared together in Holy Communion. This Good Friday, we continue the story. The supper has ended, and now Jesus and the disciples go to Gethsemane. And that is where we will pick up the story this evening. Our service comes to us in 7 different scenes, each one of them covering the events leading up to his death and burial. For those of you who have been reading the daily devotions, you know that we have been focusing in on Matthew's Gospel, and that is where all of our readings for this evening come as well. We have an evening where we transition. No doubt it is a very solemn evening to begin with, even in the garden, but it gets kind of progressively darker as we listen to the events unfold during Jesus' final hours. And we will convey that as the service continues, where the sanctuary itself will become increasingly darker as we move along. One thing I wanted to share regarding the service is there are a lot of gospel readings and there are a lot of hymns. Typically, when there are gospel readings and hymns, that means we stand. Well, we would probably be standing most of the service, so I'm going to say please remain seated throughout the entire service tonight. And finally, after we conclude the service with the last portion of the hymn, Were You There? The last of the lights will be turned off. It still will have enough natural light, I think, for us to be able to have no trouble leaving the sanctuary. But you are welcome to take some time and meditate on the events that we have heard and learned about this evening. Also, after each of the hymns, there will be time where you'll have an opportunity for brief meditation as well before we move on to the next of our readings. With that in mind, we turn to scene 1, Jesus in Gethsemane. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, and began to be grieved and agitated. Then he said to them, "I am deeply grieved, even to death. Remain here and stay awake with me." And going a little farther, he threw himself on the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not what I want, but what you want." Then he came to the disciples and found them sleeping, and he said to Peter, "So, could you not stay awake with me 1 hour? Stay awake and pray that you may not come into the time of trial. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." Again he went away for the second time and prayed, "My Father, if this cannot pass unless I drink it, your will be done." Again, he came and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. So leaving them again, he went away and prayed for the third time, saying the same words. Then he came to the disciples and said to them, "Are you still sleeping and taking your rest? See, the hour is at hand, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Get up, let us be going. See, my betrayer is at hand." Scene 2. Jesus is betrayed and arrested. While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him." At once he came up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you are here to do." Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. Suddenly, one of those with Jesus put his hand on his sword, drew it, and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you not think that I can appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled, which say it must happen in this way?" At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me as though I were a bandit? Day after day I sat in the synagogue teaching, and you did not arrest me. But all this has taken place so that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled.
You, the Lord.
Scene 3. Jesus is condemned by the Sanhedrin. Those who had arrested Jesus took him to Caiaphas, the high priest, in whose house the scribes and the elders had gathered. But Peter was following him at a distance, as far as the courtyard of the high priest. And going inside, he sat with the guards in order to see how this would end. Now the chief priests and the whole council were looking for false testimony against Jesus, so that they might put him to death. But they found none, though many false witnesses came forward. At last, 2 came forward and said, "This fellow said, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days.'" The high priest stood up and said, "Have you no answer? What is it that they testify against you?" But Jesus was silent. Then the high priest said to him, "I put you under oath before the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus said to him, "You have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, "He has blasphemed. Why do we still need witnesses? You have now heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict?" They answered, "He deserves death." Then they spat in his face and struck him, and some slapped him, saying, "Prophesy to us, you Messiah. Who is it that struck you?" Scene number 4. Jesus is denied by Peter. Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant girl came to him and said, "You also were with Jesus the Galilean." But he denied it before all of them, saying, "I do not know what you are talking about." when he went out to the porch, another servant girl saw him, and she said to the bystanders, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." Again, he denied it with an oath, "I do not know the man." After a little while, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, "Certainly you are also one of them, for your accent betrays you." Then he began to curse, and he swore an oath, "I do not know the man." At that moment, the cock crowed. Then Peter remembered what Jesus had said, "Before the cock crows, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. Scene 5. Jesus is judged by Pilate. When morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people conferred together against Jesus in order to bring about his death. They bound him, led him away, and handed him over to Pilate the governor. Now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You say so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he did not answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many accusations they make against you?" But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. So, after they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you? Jesus Barabbas, or Jesus who is called the Messiah?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that they had handed him over. While he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that innocent man, for today I have suffered a great deal because of a dream about him." Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas and to have Jesus killed. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what should I do with Jesus who is called the Messiah?" All of them said, "Let him be crucified." Then he asked, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So when Pilate saw that he could do nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took some water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." Then the people as a whole answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." So he released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified. Life isn't fair. I'm not exactly sure when I first learned that lesson, but I suspect that it was fairly early on. After all, I grew up with two older brothers, and because they were about 3 and 6 years older, they were allowed to do certain things that I couldn't do. They could stay up later. they could ride their bikes wherever they wanted. And in addition, they got more money for their allowance each week. From my perspective, looking at this circumstance, I recognize that life was not equitable, and I loudly complained to my parents. Life isn't fair. But of course, as we grow into adults, we still recognize that life isn't fair, but we notice that our understanding of why it is unfair is regarding more meaningful, and I guess I would say less self-centered ways. Why are some born into great wealth, while others live in abject poverty? Why do tornadoes miss some people's homes, while those just across the street are completely destroyed? Why do some people live to an old age, while others die in childhood? Of course, we cannot adequately answer those why questions. We can only ask them and conclude life isn't fair. Life isn't fair. As the events of the final hours of his life were unfolding, I wonder if Jesus found himself pondering that statement. He was betrayed and arrested, though he had committed no crime. He was convicted and condemned to death. But the trial against him was a total sham. He was beaten and spit upon by others, though he had done nothing to them. And this leads us to the gospel reading that I just shared, where once more we witness Jesus experiencing how unfair life can be. As Jesus stood beside Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor, he finally had someone who agreed with him, someone who at least had some sympathy for him. Pilate knew that Jesus was innocent. He also knew that the religious leaders were acting out of jealousy. Consequently, Pilate made a very bold decision. As Matthew informs us, now at the festival, the governor was accustomed to release a prisoner for the crowd, anyone whom they wanted. At that time, they had a notorious prisoner called Jesus Barabbas. By leaving the decision in the hands of the crowd, Pilate assumed that he was getting himself off the hook. However, it seems clear that Pilate thought that the crowd would ask for Jesus to be released, and that they would want Barabbas to be executed. Of course, this proved to be a fatal mistake. Frustrated by Jesus' failure to live up to their expectations, and stirred on by the religious leaders, the people clamored for Barabbas to be released. After that, Matthew records for us. Pilate said to them, "Then what should I do with Jesus, who is called the Messiah?" All of them said, "Let him be crucified." Then he asked, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." In the end, it didn't matter that Jesus hadn't done anything evil because of the vindictiveness of the religious leaders and because of the disappointment of the crowd in Jerusalem. They chose to condemn Jesus to be crucified. Talk about life being unfair. But interestingly, you know who was grateful that life wasn't fair? Barabbas. As Barabbas awoke on that fateful morning, he knew that his situation was hopeless. He knew that his execution date was set. And most of all, he knew that he justly deserved the punishment he was about to receive. While Matthew tells us that Barabbas was a notorious prisoner, we learn from the other gospel writers that Barabbas was part of an insurrection in which he had committed murder. Yes, Barabbas had a cross with his name on it. But, as we heard, Barabbas was given a pardon. He was set free. He was given a new lease on life. And in his place, an innocent man named Jesus was sentenced to die. You know who else should be eternally grateful that life isn't fair? You and me. The truth be told, all of us have a lot in common with Barabbas. We are guilty because we are sinners. And as Paul reminds us, the wages of our sin is death, eternal separation from God. But, just like Barabbas, we have been given a pardon. We have been set free. We have been given a new lease on life because in our place, an innocent man named Jesus chose to die. As the Christian author John Stott writes, as we stand before the cross, we begin to gain a clear view both of God and of ourselves, especially in relation to each other. Instead of inflicting upon us the judgment we deserved, God in Christ endured it in our place. Yes, on that hill just outside of Jerusalem, Jesus endured the suffering and death we deserved. And we avoided the punishment that was rightly ours to experience. In the cross, we see just how unfair life truly is. And for that, we can simply say, thanks be to God. Amen. Scene 6, the crucifixion of Jesus. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. They put a reed in his right hand and knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spat on him and took the reed and struck him on the head. After mocking him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him. Then they led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they came upon a man from Cyrene named Simon. They compelled this man to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall. But when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his clothes among themselves by casting lots. Then they sat down there and kept watch over him. Over his head, they put the charge against him, which read, "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." Then 2 bandits were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by derided him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying, "He saved others. He cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now, if he wants to, for he said, 'I am God's son.'" The bandits who were crucified with him also taunted him in the same way. From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 in the afternoon. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried with a loud voice, "Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani?" That is, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "This man is calling for Elijah." At once, one of them ran and got a sponge, filled it with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink. But others said, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him." Then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. Scene number 7. Jesus is laid in the tomb. When it was evening, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who was also a disciple of Jesus. he went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Then Pilate ordered it to be given to him. So Joseph took the body and wrapped it in a clean linen cloth and laid it in his own new tomb, which he had hewn in the rock. He then rolled a great stone to the door of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were there, sitting opposite the tomb.